This is Agriculture Today, and I'm Samantha Bennett with the K-State Radio Network. Today's show begins with K-State grain economist Dan O'Brien with this week's grain market update. He begins with a preview of what the rest of the show will feature. Worry over the incoming Kansas wheat crop. He also discusses the slight increase in prices across the markets following some lows from the past several weeks. Also ahead, Sharon Breiner serves as the director of the Animal Science Leadership Academy, and she joins us today to share information on the 2023 program. We also hear from Mary Marsh with the Kansas Wheat Commission. She shares that even producer optimism is starting to wane for this year's Kansas wheat crop. Fire weather risks that started this week will continue into next, according to K-State meteorologist Chip Redmond. He rounds out this week's programming with an agricultural weather report that doesn't include too much optimism for precipitation in the month ahead. That and more is coming up ahead on Agriculture Today. This is Agriculture Today. You are joined now by Dan O'Brien. He is our K-State grain economist for this week's grain market update. And Dan, I know that we've got a lot to share that's not too optimistic later in the show, so I'm really hoping you have something optimistic to start with our futures markets, hopefully.
Well, as we talk now on this Friday morning, not too long, 11 o'clock, there'll be a couple of reports that are released. It'll be the U.S. quarterly stocks report and the, U.S. plannings report. And generally, there's the possibility on the stocks report that if we meet trade estimates, we'll be showing the tightest stocks for a good amount of time, for a number of years. And for instance, for corn, analysts estimate about 7.47 billion bushels. The USDA March 1 numbers of last year were 7.75. So tighter stocks, generally supportive of higher prices. Soybeans, 1.74 billion bushels expected. Last year's 1.9. So and then for wheat, 934 million bushels, which is towards the downside. We had the low side, we had 1.029 billion bushels last year. So when that report comes out, if those numbers are at or below there, that should be supportive of prices. And for corn plantings, I think this will be the issue of the day. Even if some of our crops that are in the field now aren't doing well, and wheat, a lot of areas in the West suffering because of dry conditions, even with some moisture, still pretty dry subsoils. Still, the crops that they're looking forward to that they'll be planting may have better pricing times ahead. Corn numbers, turns out that the USDA in their Ag Outlook conference, it seems like half a year ago, is about a month ago, about 92 million acres projected. The analysts have come out and, their outlook form number was 91 million. They've come in at a little bit lower than that, about 120 million below, so 90.88 million acres. We'll see where that goes. Interesting to me that the low end of that range is down to 88 million acres. If that happens, then I think that the market, which seems to be caught up in basically just not acknowledging any risk, that's how I see. We'll talk about that in just a minute. We're just not acknowledging that anything could drive prices higher. We're stuck in our mode. That's Dan O'Brien's opinion anyway. Then it would have to respond on the higher side, at least supportively longer term because of tighter stocks use projections. And it is interesting that the USDA did project at their outlook form about 87.5 million acres of soybeans. Analysts came in, projected about 88.2. So that's kind of a conundrum sort of a thing to me in that, if anything, they're softer on corn and a little more positive on soybean acres than was the opinion just a bit of time ago. And, we've seen pretty good prices for soybeans of late. Corn, here until about 3 or 4 weeks ago, we were great guns at D's corn, D's 2023, hanging around $6, $5.90, something like that. And here in the last few days now, we're at D's corn at $5.67, and more of a neutral corn soybean price ratio with November's soybeans at $13.03. Bring both those together, and the pendulum price-wise and expectations-wise seems to be of late shifting more towards the soybean side. I would say, though, that still we're not out of the woods for all the crops that the market is counting on. Again, a large second crop of corn in Brazil. More and more reports that the delayed planting of that crop will have to be reckoned with in coming months. So I don't want to just be someone that says, oh, look at this, there's a positive note out there. But there's some risk that the market will objectively have to deal with that doesn't seem to be paying much attention to right now. And there'll be wheat numbers that come out, cotton numbers. There is a projection of higher cotton, even though a lot of the cotton area is pretty dry. Still, projection of 11.2 million acres of cotton versus 10.9 that was projected by the USDA. Sorghum, big crop in Kansas, 6.7 projection on a million acres projection on the part of the analysts. USDA had said 6.5. And for winter wheat, not a lot of change in winter wheat other than that the planted acres projected are 36.256 versus USDA's projection of 36.95. And as you and I were talking about coming on air, it's not what was planted, it's what will be harvested. And just a lot of concerns in the West with regard to what type of situation we'll have. And I do have a little bit of information. When you look at hard red winter wheat area in Kansas, 47% of it is projected in latest USDA numbers for the drought monitor. 47% of the hard red winter wheat area is in exceptional drought. And when you talk to producers and hear a lot of pessimism about where things are going, that's 47% of the area is in as tough a drought as we can have. 18% in only extreme drought. And I say that with cynicism, 13% severe drought, and then 12% in only moderate drought. So that'd leave 9%. And that's probably in the eastern part of the state someplace that's not dry. So a real challenge for the wheat producers. We're going to talk about marketing issues and all that, but if they don't have the bushels, then that's really their way to benefit from that through crop insurance. And that's the main mean, I guess. So we'll hope for something better and maybe a positive surprise, and we'll see where all this goes on it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Various factors still to play out in terms of, like you said, acres planted does not mean acres harvested in this situation, unfortunately. So it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out, like you said.
Still be tremendously important to see at least normal rainfall conditions going on into the spring planting season. Hey, and we're in March right now, just about to head into April, and pretty soon we'll have planters in the field. Field work's already occurring in western Kansas. Fertilizer going on, some sprayings, no doubt, in some places. It would be opportune to have moisture and get these crops up and get them going, and that could still happen. Again, our hope is that, as you and I have talked in previous weeks, that the breaking down of the La Nina weather pattern and the coming on of the El Nino weather pattern will come sooner rather than later. And with that, that we'll see some moisture coming in. We'll just hope for a favorable jet stream. That brings the moisture to us.
I'll preview here a little bit. Of course, our Friday shows later in the show, we end today's programming with Chip Redmond, our meteorologist here at K-State. And I will share with you, Dan, and listeners tuning in now, not very optimistic for April. So yeah, here's hoping for May, right?
Well, we'll get the crop planted then. It'll be great. But then we'll be in place waiting for that moisture to come. So sure. We'll see.
So like you said, the rest of the show, let's dedicate it to our current markets. Is there anything really that we're seeing play out now?
Yes, we have seen an uptick in grain sorghum exports that started last week as we were talking about it and has continued this week. We had 6.9 million bushels of sorghum actually shipped, and we need a pace of about 2.5 to meet the USDA's projection. So suddenly sorghum's picking up. And I would say when you look at across the board, we've seen a recovery. Well, the lead futures contracts, May corn, May hard red winter wheat, May soybeans, they've all recovered from the lows that they've had in recent weeks. And in fact, just from 1 week ago, a number of these are up about 50 cents. So it's no small thing, but some of the dryness, some of the issues in South America, all at play. In particular for corn, they had gotten down to about 608, 607, closed on Thursday at 649. So there you go. It's about 40 cents gain. One thing that I notice on all of these commodities, corn, soybeans, wheat, if you look at the variability in the last 2 months, just flat. And there's been a lot more variability in the world than has been shown in the prices. So I think we've wondered about, I've talked about how the spillover from the financial markets has impacted commodities. And gosh, that seems to be the situation situation to where we're so focused on interest rates and what the economy and what the Fed might do. And given that we're not in the fields yet, the overall pessimism has just sort of overtaken the markets. It'll give us 30, 60, 90 days, and we have to actually get these crops planted and see what's in the field and see what crop progress we have. And then I'd be surprised if we maintain these low levels of volatility. And in this case, volatility would be our friend. Without volatility, we've just been drifting lower. So here of late, some different types of news have come in, helped corn. I mentioned wheat. We had got down to about $7.75 for the May contract. For the last 2-3 weeks, up to about $8.71, so we gained 90 cents. So that's a positive. And on the soybean side, you had a huge drop down to about $14.05 thereabouts, up to $14.74, $14.75. Well, as a bounce back from that. So we'll see. Here we're coming into almost April 1st, and do have some upward momentum in the markets. And in my thinking, eventually, as there's demand that we'll need to feed, that we'll see some more response in the markets, or at least more production risk actually showing itself and leading to some pricing opportunities.
Sure. And Dan, as always, I know that you put together these great notes for everyone to take a look at, including, some of the things we've run through today, but in more detail with some maps, some great visuals here, folks. So if they want to find that, where can they find it at, Dan?
On our AgManager website, www.agmanager.info. And on the front page of that, we show updated market notes for grains, and also colleagues in livestock marketing, Glenn Tonser, and the land and cost of production with Robin Reed, Rich Llewellyn's involved there, and as well as Greg Ibendahl. So we've got a pretty good crew, and hope to provide good farm management related information to people so they can make more profitable decisions.
Absolutely. And I'll link to those. Those are some fantastic people, by the way. Not just pretty good. They're fantastic. I'll say that.
I think so. Okay.
Well, Dan, thank you so much as always. I really appreciate you joining us today.
Thanks. Take care, Samantha.
You as well. Once again, everyone, that was K-State grain economist Dan O'Brien joining us for this week's grain market update. We'll be back with more ahead on Agriculture Today. This is Agriculture Today. You are tuned in now with Sharon Breiner. She's the director of the K-State Animal Science Leadership Academy. And Sharon, that's really what we're going to talk about today is the 2023 Animal Science Leadership Academy. Applications have just opened.
Yes, thank you for having me. We're excited about this year's program.
Absolutely. We're really happy to have you on the show to learn more about it. This is a big deal. It's the 14th year of this program, and it's an impactful one here at K-State.
Yes, we're excited to welcome students to campus. It's always a joy, and especially after, the past few years of changing up our format to accommodate different challenges. We're so excited to have students back on our campuses and help them learn.
If listeners are tuning in and they're unfamiliar with the program, let's talk about this program because it's one that's really oriented for high school age students, correct?
Yes, the program's goal is to help high school students increase their animal science knowledge as well as their leadership skills. And so we really try to focus on that through workshops, tours, presentations, and some hands-on labs to help them learn in those areas.
Absolutely. Yeah. Worthwhile opportunity for sure then. And then how long does this program usually last for these students that are accepted into it?
Yes, we will go 4 days and 3 nights is June 21st through the 24th, so a Wednesday through Saturday. That students will come up to campus and spend time in the dorms, kind of get the full college experience, spending their time with us.
Absolutely. A great use of their summer this year. So high schoolers that are interested, what sort of age groups are you really looking for? What is the ideal candidate in this situation?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the ideal candidate would be anybody who's currently enrolled in high school. And so probably those rising sophomores or even students who just graduated as their senior year. But we are looking for students who have a passion for animal science, who are willing to work hard to develop their skills, their knowledge and their skills, students who, are able to step out of their comfort zone and meet new people and still have that willingness and that drive to stick with us because it is a lot of learning, it is a lot of fun, but then there's also a work component to it too. So we do need those students who are really willing to dig in and commit to our program.
Of course, this is a program that opens the eyes of these students, so it is going to have to be a bit challenging in that regard. But what can some of the learning outcomes be from this?
One of the big things that I see that I'm most excited about is students may come into animal science and they can think of 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 careers, that they might be able to have with an animal science degree. And I've heard from multiple students who've come through our program that was like, oh, I didn't know I could do that. I definitely want to do this now. I'm really passionate about nutrition, and now I'm going to go into this, and I want to get my master's in animal nutrition. And, thinking about things like that of not just that you would work, in direct contact with animals, but there's also a lot of consultative roles and other things that students can do with a future in animal science. And so I think that's one of the most exciting things that comes out of it. The other thing that's been really exciting for me to see from our students is the networking opportunities that they have. We invite students from all across the country. And so they do have an opportunity, especially those students that do go on to K-State, that choose K-State for their college career. They already know some students there because of this program. So they're able to keep that cohort going into the future, which is really neat.
Yeah, those opportunities to network, such a valuable resource in this program, because setting yourself up for success even before you even come to K-State potentially, you can't beat that.
You can't. And also we do try to give them faculty mentor time is a big part of our program. And so they work closely with our faculty here at K-State. Having that connection when you come to the university is a really, really ideal scenario, I think, for an incoming freshman to have that. We do try to keep our program, we limit it to 20 students per term, and that just helps us really have that one-on-one interaction with our students as well.
Absolutely. So kind of talking about a bit of the timeline for this program, like we mentioned at the start of this segment, the applications just opened, but that deadline is fast approaching, right?
It is, yes. Our deadline is April 15th, and those applications can be found online at youthlivestock.k-state.edu, and you can find more about the K-State Animal Science Leadership Academy program there, as well as all of our other youth livestock programs that they offer at K-State.
Absolutely. And then once again, coming up this summer is when this event will be taking place for these students that are eventually accepted. So what does preparing those students to actually come to K-State look like?
Well, for those students that are accepted, we do ask a couple of things for them to do before they come to campus, and they get an online packet of information. But one of the things we have them do before they come is to take a strengths assessment, and this is part of a leadership workshop that they will do with us. And so we want to help students discover their strengths and then be able to apply those later as they may look for a job or may look for a career field. And then another bit of pre-work that we have, we also ask our students to do a group project on a current topic within the animal science industry. And so we will typically send them some information about that small group project ahead of time. And that's where they're paired with their faculty mentor. They're put into a group of students, and we ask them to give a presentation at the end of the week.
Wonderful. Well, this sounds like a program that high school me would have loved to have partaken in. So I'm sure there's plenty of people listening right now who they themselves maybe are a high schooler that are interested in this, or they know of one that would love to take part in this event. So if those tuning in are looking for more information, Sharon, where can they find that at?
Absolutely. They can find that at youthlivestock.ksu.edu. And again, just clicking on the K-State Animal Science Leadership Academy link, that will take you to the page that tells you a little bit more of the information about the program, as well as the application that is due April 15th. It also talks about our program sponsors. The Livestock and Meat Industry Council pay for this program and support this program so that the students that do come, they pay just a $50 fee to hold a spot for the week. And so that's the only thing that we ask of students that are attending, because of our generous sponsors who are able to provide that experience for them and really want to invest in the future of the animal science industry.
Absolutely. Those sponsors, such an important role in making programs like this possible. So a big shout out to all of those that are helping out the future of agriculture here in the state of Kansas. So that's excellent. Well, Sharon, thank you so much for joining us today and telling us a bit more about the 2023 Animal Science Leadership Academy. Again, that application deadline is April 15th. But thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Once again, everyone, that was Director of the K-State Animal Science Leadership Academy, Sharon Breiner, joining us for a conversation on the 2023 Animal Science Leadership Academy that takes place every year here at K-State. We're about to cut to a short break here in a moment, but before we do, as we discussed earlier in the show with Dan O'Brien, things aren't looking too optimistic for some of the wheat crop here in Kansas. We'll also discuss that later on with our K-State meteorologist Chip Redmond. But in the meantime, we're also going to hear from Mary Marsh with the Kansas Wheat Commission. She's recently spoke with some producers from across the state, and she shares more information from them.
Wheat farmers are by nature optimistic, but that optimism is starting to wane in southwest Kansas, where much of the wheat that was drilled last fall has yet to emerge. Only 19% of the Kansas wheat crop is currently rated in good to excellent condition, with another 52% rated poor to very poor, according to the USDA's National Agricultural Statistics Service. According to the March 27th report, 77% of subsoil moisture supplies are rated short to very short. "We're eating through subsoil moisture," said Tyler Ettinger, who farms near Meade, Kansas. "We need a slow inch to inch and a half of moisture." Average annual precipitation for the area is 23 inches, but over the past year, they've received roughly half of that. Still, Ettinger says they're better off than most in the area, having received half an inch a couple weeks ago. Their fields have a stand, so they're not blowing yet, but winds have been strong and sustained for much of the area. North of Lakin in Kearney County, Gary Miloshovsky's fields aren't faring as well. An area that typically gets 18.8 inches of annual precipitation, they've only received 8.6 inches over the past 365 days. While last year's crop was also raised in a drought condition, it had the benefit of some subsoil moisture, which has been depleted by now. Even the residue left from last year's crop has been reduced by wind and drought. "We're totally out of residue," Miloshovsky said. "There's nothing out here." He said insurance adjusters will be in the area over the next couple weeks. Many of the fields that haven't even emerged yet will be adjusted out, giving farmers like Miloshovsky few options for ways to protect the blowing soil. "I'm not going to chase another crop in dry soil," he said. "Right now, it's all about getting by and spending the least amount possible." In Sheridan County, Brett Olkey's fields are surviving on half their average precipitation over the past 2 years as well. "We're pretty fortunate right now," he said, because the moisture on this wheat crop has come with a timely 3/4 of an inch of rain in October when it was drilled and another inch and a half of moisture from snow since January. Olkey's moisture probe proved that even though his area has gotten some timely moisture, the crop is far from trouble. Reaching only 2 feet down, he said that's this year's subsoil moisture was 4 feet. "We're 22 to 24 inches behind over the past few years," he said. In the sandy soils of Barber County, farmers are also dealing with less than half their average moisture. "We really need a rain, really bad, and soon," Chris Boyd said. The wheat plants are small and don't have many tillers. Fields in the Isabel area have received only 1 inch of rain total since the crop was planted. In addition to fields that have been blown out completely from strong winds, they are also dealing with winter grain mites and army cutworms, which will limit yield potential. These pests can be controlled by applying an insecticide or pesticide, an additional expense for a crop without a lot of potential. "We were blessed with a nice harvest last year, but that crop used all the subsoil moisture," Boyd said. "With virtually no moisture on this current crop and nothing in the forecast, producers are faced with difficult decisions on how many more inputs, such as insecticide for grain mites, to invest on a potential crop failure." "Rain is critical right now as temperatures begin to warm up and the wheat crop comes out of dormancy. We'll take whatever moisture we can get," said Miloshovsky. With hit-and-miss showers mostly avoiding southwest Kansas this past week and few scattered showers forecast in the next 10 days, farmers remain hopeful for the additional timely rains. "We'll stay optimistic," Ettinger said. With Kansas Wheat, this is Mary Marsh.
Once again, that was Mary Marsh with the Kansas Wheat Commission. We'll end with more insight from K-State meteorologist Chip Redmond on our agricultural weather report ahead on Agriculture Today. This is Agriculture Today. We're ending this week's programming with our agricultural weather report, as we always do, with our K-State meteorologist, Chip Redmond. So, Chip, thanks for being here today.
Morning.
It is great to have you in studio again for another update. Obviously, we spoke earlier in the week about the fire weather potential, and we're seeing that play out.
Yeah, unfortunately, we've had strong winds that have taken over most of the state, and yesterday we saw the fire weather concerns mostly constricted to just the west, and today we expand that across the whole state. With some really concerning southwest winds. You can see some gusts up to 50, 60 miles an hour. And the worst part probably is they're going to be not only combined with low humidity, but they're also going to be shifting, and that just makes things a very big challenge for firefighters. They'll go west and then eventually northwest by the end of the day with continued 50 to 60 mile an hour wind gusts. So just a really bad scenario, a lot of blowing dust and a lot of visibility issues further west. Again, And unfortunately, it's a sign that we're in spring. I mean, we see these kind of impactful storm systems when we've got drastic temperature gradients across the United States where the warm air is trying to push northward and kind of settle in for summer, and that winter cold is still hanging in there just enough to our north and west, and in between is the battleground, and that's where we get these big storm systems that are high impact and typically associated with a lot of wind. It's not abnormal for this time of year, but as we'll talk about in a little bit, the frequency that we're seeing them right now and expect to see them over the next week is concerning.
Yeah, so this fire weather isn't just a concern for now. You're very strongly saying that it's going to continue into next week as well.
Yeah, as you look at just this week, we had some pretty good humidity recoveries at night, so we were able to have some ambient moisture in the atmosphere that just helped narrow the burn windows and kind of reduce the fire potential somewhat and keep it in check across the state this week, even with the potent fire weather conditions. But after this cold front, Friday night, we'll be cooler briefly on Saturday, then we're going to warm right back up starting Sunday. And we're talking like much above normal, like 10 degrees plus above normal temperatures. Average temperatures in Kansas are right around the 60 to low 60s right now. And our average lows are in the upper 30s. So we're looking at 70, 75 degrees. And with dry conditions persisting, we're not going to have that ambient moisture. So what we do is we set up for the next storm system mid next week is a much drier scenario with preceding conditions as well as with the storm system, and that could result in even more increased fire weather concerns.
Sure, and that lack of precipitation, that lack of moisture isn't foreign to us this month. It's been a fairly dry month for Kansas.
Yeah, March can go either boom or bust. We can have nothing. We've had statewide average of 1/10 of an inch of moisture in March, but we also can see tons of moisture, and we just haven't had that. In fact, right now, when we're recording this, we're sitting at about the 17th driest March on record, which is pretty high up there when we consider that range. And unfortunately, with no moisture really expected from this storm system, we're going to probably finish the month that way. And that's had a big impact with drought starting to re-expand and most of the state growing another 1 to 2 inches in the bucket of a deficit they need to overcome to get out of drought. And when we combine that with the wind that we're seeing and now warmer temperatures, just an ugly scenario as you go into April.
Really concerning, especially when we consider that now we're starting to see green up in places where there is wheat, and those higher temperatures, longer days, it's not a good recipe.
No, we really need moisture to sustain that wheat, and we're just not seeing it in the forecast. The wheat's been kind of surviving off some of that moisture that we got in January, and that's been great, but as that demand increases, we've got to keep up. And unfortunately, for the next 7 to 10 days, it just doesn't seem like there'll be any chance of that. And keep in mind, our temperatures are warming throughout that period. And as you get into April, we see our average temperatures start to get into the upper 60s, and just moisture demands are much more. So hopefully we can get something in here for folks.
Sure, absolutely. And with that warming up comes, of course, soil temperatures that are starting to rise as well. And I'm sure people are eager to get on their planters soon.
Yeah, unfortunately, they're not planting into dry soils for the most part. But, yeah, 50 degrees has been reached for most of southern Kansas now, along the Oklahoma border especially, and we're keeping it now. That's a 7-day average. So we're at that threshold. Unfortunately, folks are kind of concerned, obviously, for the future, but hopefully the seed can sit in there a little bit and they can get their planting done in time, and then it'll finally rain.
Absolutely. Here's hoping. And Chip, as always, thanks so much for joining us today.
Yep, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Once again, everyone, that was K-State meteorologist Chip Redmond rounding out this Friday's show with our agricultural weather report. We'll be back with more on Monday on Agriculture Today.